Hello, you crazy little marketing bees. You're tuned into episode 65 of the Marketing Buzzword Podcast.
This is the Marketing Buzzword Podcast, the podcast where we dissect the world's most common marketing buzzwords. Hold on tight. We are about to fly around the beehive to see the latest buzzwords that stuck to the marketing bees.
Hello again, and welcome back to the Marketing Buzzword Podcast. This is the podcast which helps you to understand what all these business and marketing buzzwords actually mean and how they can be helpful or not going forward. I'm your host, Ben Roberts, and in this show, I am the marketing bee in charge of making sure I can get on the right guests and ask the right questions to make sure that these words and phrases actually make sense. And in today's show, we're going to make sense of the buzzword that is social intelligence. I love this term, and I'm so excited to share this one with you. Before we do so, though, I need to remind you this podcast is powered by Talkative. Talkative is a company that brings together live, web chat, voice calls, video calls, and co-browsing together in one package, embedded into your website with just 3 lines of code. Allows your customers to contact you almost how they want, allows you to respond in a timely manner with full integration into your CRM, your existing tools, your contact center, and basically improves the customer experience. Find out more at talkative.uk. And one final thing before we get on to this week's guest, if you are loving the show, please feel free to give me a review on iTunes. I really do appreciate it. It really helps sort of boost the show's profile and give some of that, what's the word I'm looking for? Social proof, that's it. Some social proof about how good the show is. And also, we're on course again for another huge record download month in October. Every single month this podcast has grown incredibly, and yeah, it's just absolutely surreal. So thank you so much for listening. Right, that's more enough about me and the show. It's time to introduce this week's guest. Now, this week's expert buzzword bee is a guy who I met in person in thinking about May time, so God, six months ago maybe. And we became fast friends, and I've been following a lot of what he's been doing. And he's recently moved companies, and I'm really glad that I could finally get him on the show, because I've been trying to sort of synchronise our diaries for ages. So, Ben Doncourt is the expert buzzword bee this week. And so Ben Doncourt is the research strategist at Brandwatch, a data geek and social media enthusiast at heart. He often writes and speaks about social intelligence, social physics, and digital analytics. You can find him writing on his blog, that's what I mean. brnrd.me. There we are. brnrd.me, and tweeting as FR314 with an endless supply of coffee. I really should have read that bio in more detail before trying to cut. Anyway, that is what I love about doing the show. We'll do it a bit more raw, and we'll just see what happens as we go along. Right, though, but that is more than enough from me. Let's get on with the show. Hi, Ben, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ben. Great to be here.
Oh, mate, I'm so excited. I've been trying to get you on for so long now, and I'm so excited to be able to actually... Well, finally, our diaries actually were able to sync up, and I was able to get you on.
Yeah.
But this is an episode that I'm really excited about, because this is something that I've been doing a lot of thinking about. And I know it's on the tip of a lot of people's tongues, and we're going to talk about social intelligence today. And now, Ben, let's strip this right back to the start. What on earth is social intelligence to start off with?
Right. In a very quick nutshell, social intelligence includes ways to gather data and analyze data from business information as well as social platforms, especially to get historical, current, and predictive views of where a company or where a business is going. That is pretty much this in a nutshell. And actually, it's not that new. Business intelligence, which is, I'd say, social intelligence grandfather, has been going on, or has been a thing for a couple of centuries now. And the definition of business intelligence, or BI as we know now, is just the group of ways, a group of methods or strategies, if you want to say it that way, that companies can use to get data from business information to get a a sense of where the business is going or to be more strategic. And this is basically that, but with social platforms and with the reality of where we are with the interwebs in 2018 and moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I think it's something that I've been looking at a lot over the last sort of 6 months or so, is looking at actually how buzzwords are potentially changing over time and how they start off as one thing, and through a series of technological advancements or changes in the industry, it then takes on a new form. And this is what we're seeing now, isn't it? Like you said, it started off as just general business intelligence before social was a thing, and the implementation of social becoming a major disruptor in terms of the business sphere has now seen social intelligence become a real live thing. And it's amazing, but I guess because I'm assuming then from social intelligence to business intelligence, we're seeing just a lot more real-time data. Is that the real difference between social intelligence and business intelligence? Is it the fact that it's real-time, or are there some other differences that really make them separate from each other?
It's actually beyond real-time. Now, I think there's a difference between the perception and reality of the difference between business intelligence and social intelligence. Now, the perception of it is that business intelligence is more about financial stuff. Like if you close your eyes and think about business intelligence, you're probably thinking about stock markets and finance data and traffic data perhaps, but basically everything except social media or everything except marketing perhaps. Whereas if you think of social intelligence, you think of real-time social data. You think of engagement. You think of clicks from one platform to another platform. You think of analyzing the real journey of a customer these days, which is not linear at all. It's more like considering one day, then considering for maybe a week or 10 days, and then going to another competitor site, and then like all these other methods, and then lining them all up until you finally convert. Now, that is pretty much the perception these days. The reality is that business intelligence and social intelligence are not that different. The main difference is that social intelligence, to me, is the next evolution of business intelligence. Business intelligence seems to gather more information around internal business data. So, for instance, I've seen business intelligence data including things like HR data or employee data, or even data from employer branding, or even just employer engagement, as in how many of our how many of our employees are actually engaged with our product, and how many of them are selling it to their families and friends, which social intelligence can cover as well. But there seems to be, I think, a difference in maturity. But I do think that they both go hand in hand. Like social intelligence is pretty much the nephew of BI.
Is it one of those things where it's like a generational then difference, where it's almost like you said, it's almost like the nephew, or like you refer to business intelligence as the grandfather? Is that almost taken from the sense of, again, like the people who operate businesses, people who are of the grandfather generation, in inverted commas, in business, they're still using the term business intelligence, whereas actually this new Gen Z, millennial, whichever flipping damn term we want to use this week, is that with the way it seems to be separated out at the moment?
I see it that way. I mean, mainly because people see business intelligence as different from BI, even though BI is acronym for business intelligence. But mainly because business intelligence mainly came from the financial world, right? That's where it came from. So people usually associate that with finance. Then BI the reference of the reference of BI only came from the early 90s. From a Gartner analyst, if I remember correctly. And that was when .com first started. So that was when the association became, business intelligence equals internet. But now social intelligence is the next wave. Is with Web 3.0. Is with adding things like dark social, plus the social that we all know and love with the tools that we all know and love, plus other bits and pieces from various APIs and mining and whatever have you. So yes, I do think that it is a generational thing. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to the fourth wave. Like, what is the fourth wave going to be? I have a few ideas, but I can leave that to the end.
No, I think I'm definitely interested to explore that one later on. But one of the things that sort of strikes me then about this new wave of social intelligence is that Are we at a stage now where there are so many social platforms and there is so much data which these platforms are offering up to us, and which us as business owners, marketers, salespeople are craving? We're craving all this data from all these social media platforms. Are we getting to that point now where it's almost paralysis by analysis, where there's so much data thrown at us and we just sort of go, that I don't know what actually matters anymore? So people talk about meaningful interactions, people talk about engagement, people talk about comments, likes, shares, people talk about, what's your actual ROI, what's your click-through rate, are you keeping everyone on the platform? Where do you actually start with all these things, and how do you potentially consolidate that down then to avoid your paralysis by analysis?
Right. I think it's down to a few things. The first thing I can think of is not having the right people to do the analysis. If you've got the right people, whether it's in-house or agency, I don't judge. If you've got the right people analyzing the data, or knowing where to find the correct data, the right metrics, because I've never really cared about number of followers, because that is never an indication of reach. Or at least true reach anyway. If you've got the right people with the right tools, then you don't worry so much about that analysis paralysis. You do know that you have like a whole, like you're wading in a sea of metrics, but you know that you have the right metrics with you because you've got the right people with that. The second thing I would say as well is that it isn't so much about we're drowning in metrics, is the fact that all these platforms are just avenues where people congregate. They're pretty much just marketplaces, right? We've got almost half of the world's population on social media now. 55% on the internet, and then almost half of them on social media. So yes, we can expect more and more data, but we can also expect more granular data, which I think is where social intelligence is going, not just thinking about engagement, but also things like the emotion behind engagement, or even the reason that spurred that engagement. So I think it's not so much about the paralysis analysis. If companies are worrying about that to me is an indication that they either don't have the right tool or they don't have the right people. I've never met a doctor who was like, I am paralyzed by the number of diseases out there. They're like, you know what? I know my job. I know what you have. This is what you're going to take, and have a nice day. And I think the same works for analysts. I'm not saying that we are the doctors of companies, but we could be. But I guess what I'm saying is that we know where to find the right metrics to answer, to give the right answers to the questions that whoever in a business has.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a huge amount of sense. I mean, I never had you down as a doctor, Ben, but I feel like you could do this. I feel like you could fix everything. But no,
I honestly feel like it, yeah.
But the thing is, I see, like, for example, what you guys do at Brandwatch. I mean, the level of data, the level of insight from everything from looking at sort of the sentiment, the types of the locations, all the different data's in there. All these different data fields can all actually, you don't even necessarily have to look at them all at the same time. And that's where people maybe do get that paralysis by analysis. They're trying to look at all the data. So they're actually looking at potentially what matters. Because if you're collecting that data, you're able to make informed decisions on it. If you don't have that data in the first place, you're making guesses purely with your guts, which actually isn't informing and isn't really making the right decision. Well, it could be making the right decision, but you're chancing your arm a little bit, isn't it? With all the data there, you can actually put all the right filters in. You put your whatever matters to you, whether it is likes or shares, and which we probably shouldn't really be encouraging people just to look at those as their metrics. But but at least by collecting that data, you are able to use it then, and you choose then how you interpret that data yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are not supposed to be using everything they collect. So I've worked for Microsoft, for instance, and I love their approach to data because they collect a whole bunch of metrics ethically, but they only use the metrics that matter. The other metrics are only used when they need to go back and add some context to the analysis, when you need to add some color to it. This is the number of people who converted on our website, but you can then also add a paragraph about how perhaps you had a higher conversion rate in the north of England versus the south of England, and this is the reason why. Like, if you want to build deeper correlations, that's all great, but that just adds extra level of depth to the main bit, which is this is the number of conversions. So yeah, I don't think you should be using everything you collect. You should be wise about what you collect and what you use. And then we could also go off on a tangent about ethically collecting data, as in just because you can collect it doesn't mean you should. But I guess that's for another episode. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I say ethics are definitely something. I mean, obviously, we're obviously based in the UK, and we've had all this the European GDPR legislation, which made people panic, and then it turned out to be absolutely fine. And it's all these little things, but it is important, though, isn't it? That we are collecting that data in an ethical way. And again, not all data you don't have to use all data, but actually by having that data there, it allows you to have that backstop. It allows you to have that deeper understanding should you need it. So, for example, if you are seeing a lot of fluctuations on different months in terms of your conversion rate, then actually by collecting that data, you are able to then go deeper, and you're able to make those small changes depending on where. If you didn't have that data in the first place, then you're not able to make that informed decision about why that change is going on.
Absolutely, sure.
But when one thing then that I guess a lot of business owners, including myself, can sometimes see is, how do we avoid data almost becoming a blocker to change? Now, what I mean by that is people will look at that and go, okay, I can see actually how I can use data to make little changes, but also actually data can be a big blocker in terms of, oh, look, well, we've always had this level of data, so why do we need to do anything more? How do we, as business owners, look at data and actually always use it to be able to keep constantly improving instead of using it as a barrier to change, if that makes sense? Because it's quite easy to say, well, look, we've always had a 3% conversion rate. Why would I change it? I know what I'm doing on 3%. If I make that change, is it going to be a risk and ruin my conversion rate going forward? How do businesses manage that?
Right. Having spoken to, especially at conferences as well as back when I used to consult, having spoken to a lot of people in the C-suite, so CEOs and CMOs and everyone else that starts with a C, it seems to be normal for some people to just report out of habit or out of tradition, as in this is how we've always done it, so this is how we're always going to do it, as if marketing doesn't change, as if people's behaviors don't change, as if the way that people use social platforms to get to our website and then finally convert or not convert doesn't change. That is flawed. Maybe that worked way back when for whatever reason, and maybe it's a thing that maybe that's what leading to paralysis for some companies. Just the fact that because they're so insular in what they report and how they report and who they report it to, and because they don't really want to look left and right to see that actually people are doing things differently these days, that is what can lead to paralysis. I think that data should be, the way that you report on data should be looked at, I'd say, every 6 to 12 months. Like, have a yearly strategy for your analysis internally and have a mid-year review of how are things going. Are we storing our data in the right places? Are we using this data in the right way? Do we even have the right people for it? And maybe you can even build a business case to get, I don't know, a social media analyst or data scientist or whatever you need. But especially now where data is more and more available and more regulations are coming on to regulate this data, it is necessary to have yearly audits for that. If you go yearly audits, you will not fall in the habit of being stuck in the same way of analyzing data every time. Also because, let's be honest, the big platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and etc., they change the analytics platforms as well. I mean, I've been an analyst at heart for the last 11 years, and I've seen at least 3 or 4 different iterations of Facebook Insights with various metrics available, with additions and removals. So if platforms change, marketers and analysts should change to adapt to that as well. It is just the natural way of doing it. But if you, in 2018, still use metrics like followers and clout, as if clout hasn't died already, as if followers hasn't been an indication of reach for a long time, then you're just going to be stuck in the past. Meanwhile, your competitors are advancing, so you might want to join them.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things. Actually, is look, I think that's almost exactly the answer I was hoping you were going to say, really, and it was looking at the fact that actually the data isn't a blocker itself. It is purely the people behind it, and the fact that the platforms change so regularly, can change quite in a big way. For example, we looked at this Facebook apocalypse back in February, where they changed a massive way on the algorithm, so everything was weighted towards that meaningful interactions and actually having longer form comments and having stirring conversations, and it means that businesses have to interact in a completely different way in order to get the same results. And it's interesting that actually, look, I love the bit that you said that if you keep reporting things the same way, then things are going to either stop or be different because people's habits change. The way people use platforms is completely different. I mean, for let's look 2 years ago, the amount of tools that were on Instagram as opposed to what they are now is completely different. Instagram is changing almost every week. It feels like there's a new tool, there's a new bit to it. I remember when I had to install different apps to be able to do boomerangs and all sorts of stuff, and now it's all embedded in there, and it's all little things like that actually do have a huge difference. If people, again, it's if they fall behind, they get left behind.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
And one other thing that I guess maybe I'm being, I feel like my questions are really negative today, Ben. I apologise profusely. Is social intelligence a blocker to creativity? And what I mean by that is, if we're looking at the data, go, okay, we just need to do a few more of these types of posts. We need to do a few more of these types of posts instead of actually getting people to think outside the box. What are your thoughts around social intelligence being a blocker to creativity? I feel like the cogs are going.
I've heard that before. There was a debate earlier this year about the need of social listening, for instance, and the debate boiled down to, instead of just scraping the internet for mentions of your product, you should have a really strong creative team internally that gets some creative ideas out to get the best product out for people, instead of just giving people what they're asking for and giving people what they want. And I love how the responses came from, like, the analysts, and one in particular was Dr. Gillian Ney, who is the UK's first doctor of social media, and she was on the side of, no, you do need social listening, because why wouldn't you use it with all this data? Whereas creatives were like, no, you don't need that, you just need creativity instead, because creativity will save us from everything. And I was in the middle, like, why is it either or? Like, you need both. You need social listening to drive, or you need social intelligence to drive creativity, and creativity should also help you with your social intelligence as well. I especially admire analysts who don't have a background in data or statistics, or like who have like a creative background, because they can approach data in a different way, like almost like from a left field way. So they'll say, actually, I know that there's this trend on this platform, and there's this creative new sub theme emerging. How about we analyze the data from that, or even vice versa? So I think that you will only fail if you only rely on one without looking at the other. Because let's look at the counter argument. If you only rely on creativity, but you don't look at data, you will come up with some really creative products. You will come up with some really funky products, but you might also come up with the next Zune.
No, I think that
if we remember the good old Zune, like, you might come up with like the next Winamp or the next Zune, or basically like the next product that, yes, it is going to be used, but because it's not backed by data, it doesn't really have much longevity. It probably won't even have that much adoption. What you can also do is you can even have like a great creative product out there, but then monitor the performance of it through data. I remember when I joined BT, they were launching their BT Home Hub 4. We can agree that people do not care about routers as long as they work.
I love my BT Home Hub 4. Don't you say bad things about it, Ben. I love it. It's so much better than my Home Hub 3.
the sleek design is amazing. And I remember that back then they were just used to, that BT were just used to sending out bulky routers to their customers. So there was a creative team at BT, a team of really creative engineers who said, oh, we can add these colors, we can make it funky, and we can do this, and we can do that. And then I joined and I said, well, how about we also listen to what the customer is asking for? Most of our communities were on forums first, Twitter second, and then other platforms third. And on forums, we actually realized that people wanted it to be so slim that it could fit in a letterbox, because you and I can both relate to the nuisance of having to come home from work and seeing that slip from Royal Mail saying, oh, sorry we missed you, please come to the post office at a really inconvenient time to come and get your router. Or other gamers were thinking, I want a router that is future proof. I want a router that I don't have to update every year. I want to update my console every year, but not the router. So we gave all of this data to the creative folks, to the engineers, and they then built the router that the customer wanted. It was still creative. It still has so much creativity that a lot of that is that a lot of the structure from that router is still present in today's routers as well. And that was, I think, 5 years ago. So clearly that worked. They're just iterating from it. But that is a great example of using creativity and data at the expense of neither of them.
I think that's an incredible way of thinking of things, isn't it? Because it's about actually, look, we're giving the customers what we want based upon the data. We're allowing that bit of creative flexibility to make it look nice, to be a bit more, I guess, even people actually will take pictures of their routers these days, and actually if a picture of a router looks there, and again, usually a router is on display in the house. I know my one. It's not I'm not put it in a frame on my wall, but it's underneath the TV. I will see it pretty much every day, and actually the fact that it doesn't in my Home Hub 4 actually looks quite nice means that I don't actually want to bury it in the back of the room, back of the sort of cupboard out the way. It means I actually, one, it's in the middle of my house, which means I get more signal all the way around my house, and two, actually I'm not ashamed to have it on display.
There you go. So that too is an insight. So if a lot of people start talking about it, right? If a lot of people start posting pictures on Instagram of their living rooms, and the router is there, and the router has the BT logo on it, and if you have a social intelligence tool like Brandwatch, for instance, that does image identification, and you can identify all these pictures of these routers and products with the BT logo, that is an insight in itself. The analysts at BT can then, with that data, say, actually, we see that people love to have BT routers front and center in the living room, not only because of signal, of course, like it needs to be close to the window because that's how you get the best signal or whatever, but it could also become a living room statement. It can be a statement in your living room just as much as your live, laugh, love portrait is, right? Not saying that you have one. I'm just saying.
I've actually got an A to Z of the Dalai Lama quotes actually. So there we are. I'm proper edgy millennial.
I really want to see what your Etsy profile looks like. But anyway, so if that is an insight, then the analyst can say, for the next router, let's push out, say, 20 different styles of routers. Let's bring 20 designers. They can all design it differently, so the customer can then choose which one can fit their apartment better. All of these are insights that show that creativity can work with data, and I think that both of them work best when they work together, not just on their own. Because I've seen way too many companies where data is in the back somewhere, and creative team is like on the lower floor somewhere else, and they don't communicate with each other, like they don't know each other, even though they're in the same company. I mean, they really should work together if you really want your company to succeed on both fronts.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think it's something that even in the small tech startup that I work in, we're trying to make sure that we have as few potential silos as possible. So, for example, all our daily stand-ups are done in the main office where all the other people are. So actually anyone, even if they're not necessarily involved, they can at least hear. So actually if something goes in there, if they subconsciously, something goes in their head, they can actually then, I've got an idea here, or something like that, because actually being able to open that up and have that open silos means that you're taking ideas from other places within your business, that bit of entrepreneurship, again, another buzzword we can chuck in there for good measure. But all these different things where you can actually take ideas from different parts of the business. You don't have to then go and hire these external consultants, because you're actually working together and you're actually creatively solving problems based upon data. Look at that. I chucked in creativity, problem solving, data, flipping heck. It's all going away. But Ben, let's strip this back a little bit again, because we started looking at the big brands again, and I'm aware that we can see with a huge amount of investment that the big brands can really do this quite effectively, because they have the resources there. If we're looking towards maybe the small or medium-sized businesses, I know this is something that you'd be keen to talk about, is what sort of resources are there out there that small, medium, or even large businesses, again, can use in order to be able to sort of become more intelligent with their social data? What tools or resources are out there to help people with their social intelligence, data gathering, and data analysis needs?
Right. I will start by saying the following. If companies want to invest in social intelligence, they need to realize that the reality is that you may have to pay for it. In the same way that if you want to go for a business intelligence tool like Tableau or Power BI or Google Data Studio, you would have to pay. And I say this because usually when I get this question from, say, people at conferences, they usually expect me to give them like a full list of free tools or freemium tools that they can go for a trial for 30 days and then move on to the next one. If you really want to apply yourself to social intelligence, it does need your undivided investment. So having said that, the tools that you should go for include social listening tools that can help you scrape, that can help you identify mentions of your product, your service, your competitors, a topic, a theme, what your communities are talking about. It shouldn't just be social listening, it should go beyond that. So it should also listen in the way that your consumers talk. So your consumers are more and more visual these days, posting pictures on Instagram rather than posting text, for instance. So perhaps a tool that can support identifying pictures or identifying your product or your logo in a picture. Finding tools that have a wider reach than you do. I think the pitfall that a lot of companies go through is that they go for tools that only have coverage for the platforms they're on. So saying, "Oh, I'm on Twitter, so only need a tool that can cover Twitter." So sometimes they go on Google, right? And they'll only go on Twitter, and so they'll only go on Google and say Twitter social analytics tool. But your customers are not just on Twitter, and actually, I'm sure that a whole bunch of the customers are not on Twitter at all. Maybe some of them are on microblogs. Maybe some of them are on certain forums. Maybe some of them are on forums that are behind a login wall or a paywall. Say Mumsnet, for instance, which is a huge trove of data there. Just parents talking to each other, recommending products to each other, as well as recommending against a product, but they will go into detail as to why you should or should not go for a product. I love that platform for those recommendations. So social listening that basically can look at things like maybe sound bites, maybe images, maybe videos, whatever. Then you also need a BI tool. And when I say BI tool, I mean a tool that can collect all of this data. Like you can just dump all this data in there, and it can either overlay the commonalities, or you can have a data scientist who can do that for you. I've been mentioning data scientists because it is essential for someone to use that data, to work on the data, while also knowing how to find trends within it without having to rely on a third-party tool. So if you have a data scientist who knows programming languages like Python or like R, they can create some great visualizations that don't require you to have a visualization tool, for instance. So yes, these data scientists do cost more, but again, failing to see what your customers are costs a lot more than a data scientist. So I don't see it as a cost. I see it as an investment. But long story short, for social intelligence, in the same way that it works with business intelligence way back when, you do need multiple tools. A strong social intelligence tool out there, a strong tool that looks into audiences and can tell you which audiences to target, perhaps audiences that you were not even aware of. A strong tool that can identify influences within those communities. And we're getting into social physics territory here, but and then the last tool that I would have would be a BI tool, just a tool that can help you visualize that data, or even just work with copious amounts of data just to find where the real nugget is.
Oh, I absolutely love that. I love sort of your raw honesty there, actually, because a lot of people can come on and quite easily say, oh, you can do this for free, you can do this for free, or you can just go into your Facebook analytics and you can take a look at those, and that'll be absolutely fine. And it's actually, no, I love that raw honesty of going, look, you are going to have to pay for this stuff, but it is 100% worth it if you invest in the right areas and you build up a collection of different tools, because again, no one tool is out there that does all the stuff that you'll need. And if you can find that, please share it with me, because flipping heck, I've been trying to look for one tool that does absolutely everything, but that's where the tools have their own strengths, and that's what makes each tool unique. If every tool did everything, then they wouldn't be that uniqueness. And I love sort of that blend between the BI tools, between sort of the social listening, between sort of all these, how you'd sort of figure it all out together. And there's a tool that I've looked at before, which was, I think it was used by Adidas or something, and basically it scans all the images put on the internet, I think is on social media and stuff, and whether the Adidas were tagged in it or not, the tool would actually be able to pick out parts of the logo and stuff and inform Adidas that people were wearing Adidas in these photos, whether they were tagged in it or not. And I thought stuff like that is just incredibly powerful, especially as a consumer brand where you've got a strong logo or you've got a really powerful presence, and you want to make sure that actually, look, you've got sponsored athletes. Are they wearing all your kit? Are people just generally wearing wearing your brand? In what setting are they taking pictures? Because you could suddenly find that skaters were actually wearing all your pictures, were wearing all your Nike high tops, for example, around the skate park. And you're like, well, we never designed it for that purpose. And it's amazing, actually, again, how we use that data to inform our creativity. And we go, oh, actually, look, we can come up with some new creative examples, because obviously they're being used in that context. Well, again, if it was just using your gut or your instinct, you may never have seen that connection in the first place.
Absolutely. Your gut and your instinct is limited to you. Like, your gut and your instinct is just limited to you, your experience, your knowledge. It doesn't know much beyond what's outside you. So yeah, you definitely do need data, which is basically what's outside you. Then you need to combine the two. Also, one thing I was saying that is that even if I did find an all-in-one tool, it would not be the best tool to go for. Which kind of sounds like not oxymoron, a paradox. Words. An all-in-one tools and all-in-one suites out there who claim to be, to do everything for everyone, like multi-purpose tools, are just not the best for what you need. They might be great in terms of costs, as in you may be saving loads of money, I'm absolutely sure. But when it comes to the quality of the output, it is definitely not what I would recommend. I usually compare all-in-one tools to, those multi-purpose floor cleaners. They're like, oh, you can clean everything with this. But then if you do have a really great piece of wood you need to clean and you were to use a multi-purpose cleaner for that, you can tell I'm speaking from personal experience right now, you would just ruin it.
I can see this was a dark day in your house, wasn't it, Ben? I could see it.
Having to go back to IKEA to say I messed this up myself. But yeah, I mean, go for a social intelligence tool that specializes in social intelligence. Go for a community management platform that specializes in that. Like, you don't really want to go for an all-in-one tool that just does an average job at everything. Yes, you may have to pay more, but I think all-in-one tools are great as a starting point, but not as something to rely on for the long term.
I absolutely love that point. I think that's a beautiful way to wrap that up, Ben. I think that's a great point, isn't it? It's just that, yes, they can do everything, but they'll do everything slightly less good. Again, jack of all trades, master of none. And again, as a starting point where you've got low budget and you want to see how it all works, potentially it's a good way to start off. But actually, where you want to go deeper, you want to get more detail, more depth, more context, and that's the key thing, isn't it, with data, is that context. Then you need to sort of break it down and separate it out a little bit. So thank you so much for coming on today, Ben. But
thank you for having me.
No, absolutely no problem. But before I let you go, Ben, I'm not going to let you run off that easily. I'm going to have to ask you the question that I ask everyone at the end of each show, Ben, and I think you know what's coming because I know you've been listening to a lot of these episodes. I know that the data doesn't lie.
Right.
No, but seriously, what other marketing buzzwords out there right now are you loving or hating? What is really grinding your gears and making you go, please stop saying this? Or are you going, yes, this is really, I think it's going to be really important. It's potentially going to be the next big thing.
Can I be an absolute pain and say two?
No, you absolutely cannot. No, I'm joking. Of course you can. Of course you can, mate.
All right. As a first on your podcast, I'll just say two. Trendsetters. One, I'll say one that's already been said before, I think twice before, but millennial, not only because I am one, but mainly because when 9 times out of 10, when I hear it used in the context of data, it's not used constructively or in a positive way, as in it's used in a way that's more like, oh, let's just pick these people who were born within this generation and let's attribute characters and habits and trends to all of them. I liken that to when analysts usually do the analysis by gender, for instance, or by age, where they say, oh, let's just pick the women bucket and this is how they all think when it comes to our product. Actually, no. Would you know that a lot of women actually think differently within each other? Like you've got different subsets, different communities. Even when it comes to millennials, you've got early millennials and late millennials. I think I'm right in the middle.
Whoa, Ben, I can't believe this. I can't believe that women think differently to other women, men think differently to other men and women think differently, boys and girls think differently, boys and other boys think differently. I mean, Ben, I can't believe it, mate. You're talking crazy now.
It's an insight I'm willing to share on your platform. This is an exclusive right now. So I think like millennial is a word that, of course, is used to categorize a generation. We do need words that categorize stuff because language. However, when it comes to data, we should be careful about just using a whole bucket of people to as a scapegoat for habits, as a scapegoat for trends, because that's just not how it works. The second word, the second expression is data science. Not because I hate it. I mean, I love data science, but I think that data science needs to be a bit demystified because not a lot of people know what it actually means. Then people usually think of data science as someone in the corner with their headphones on, just coding and cracking into someone's bank account and getting their money and Bitcoin and other words that they don't fully understand, all in one sentence, when actually it's a lot more beyond that. And yeah, so it doesn't irk me, but it just irks me how people misuse that. So millennials and data science.
No, I think that's good. I think one of the first episodes on this podcast, I love this now, I can quote my back catalogue. I think it was like episode maybe 4 or 5, I had a guy called Ash Phillips on, and he runs a young entrepreneurs network, and we talked about millennial marketing and how, again, look, it was just such a broad categorization, and it actually doesn't really add anything to the debate when you see all these posts that are like, 16 ways to reach millennials. Well, I'll tell you what you can do then. You target everyone in a big age bracket and see how well your ad results come back on targeting everyone between whatever age group you count your millennials at. Because no one has a set definition of what a millennial is. It's somewhat between somewhere there. For some people, it's here. But yeah, that's one that grinds my gears equally, Ben. No, but seriously, thank you so much for coming on today. I'm going to forgive you because you gave me such a good episode there. I'm going to forgive you for throwing 2 at me there.
Oh, thank you.
No, but seriously, thanks so much, Ben. I've made a huge amount of notes, and I know this will be hugely valuable for all the listeners. So thank you so much for coming on again.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you're anything like me, you will see a huge amount of benefit potentially in the way that analytics and the role that analytics can play within our businesses. I look at how we can actually use data for ways in which we can collect it all, but not necessarily use it all. And that's one of the key things, is if we're collecting it all, we know that it's there and we can use it at a later date. And it's not creating that paralysis by analysis. Again, a term that I kept throwing at Ben to see, actually this is maybe one of the big problems that people have, is either not having enough data or having too much data, they're swamped in it and then can't make any decisions. And I love sort of Ben's approach to categorizing that data and making the data work for you, and either to inform your decisions, to sort of go with your gut, or actually ultimately to say, no, this is definitely the route that you need to take. And it basically gives you much more informed choices. I guess it's a more accurate way of potentially guesstimating, because no data is necessarily perfect, because things are changing all the time, the market's changing. But it'll give you a much better idea than if you didn't use that data in the first place. And I love the idea as well about having to use so many tools. I mean, we all know that there is never one tool to rule them all. But it's interesting to see his view on that, and that's something that I'm definitely going to be taking from this and trying to implement in the business at Talkative going forward. So please let me know what you think of what you thought. Think and thought of the show. That'll do. If you did enjoy this week's show, please do leave a review on iTunes. John Asperian wrote. Oh god, this is a terrible day. John Asperian created a video which is up on the marketingbuzzword.com website, which will show you how to easily review the podcast on iOS and on somewhere else. God, it's really been a bad day. Alright, that's it. That's it from me. I'll be back on Thursday with another bite-sized buzzword. Goodbye.
This podcast is part of the You Are the Media Network.